Hi guys. So in this video, I'm going to give a quick demonstration of how to use the Waveform software in demo mode. For those of you who are going to do the LT-Spice version of the lab practical. Okay, so basically in the LT-Spice version of the lab practical with this demo mode questions, what we are trying to assess is your ability to generate signals using Wavegen, given the different shapes, amplitudes, and offsets of the signal. Two is that you can adjust the scales and offsets on the oscilloscope to visualize the signal the best way you want to look at it. And third is that you have the ability to measure the signal measure different aspects of the signal like amplitude and frequency once it is acquired and displayed on the oscilloscope. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing you want to do, well, first thing I should do is share my screen. So first thing you want to do is open up the Waveforms application. Now, when it does that, when you don't have any device connected, it's going to complain, but you just click OK. And you can choose Analog Discovery 2 in demo mode from the available devices. Okay, you don't need to change anything else. Now that you're here, on the left, you have the different instruments available. Scope, Wavegen, supplies, voltmeter, and so on and so forth. For the purposes of this exam, the only two instruments you're going to need is the scope and the Wavegen. Okay, so let's start with Wavegen. Here, this is where you can give the software the different parameters for the signal that you want to generate. Okay, and you can so right now it's set up to only generate one signal on channel 1. But you can easily add a second channel here, and that will allow you to generate two channels, okay? Two signals. Okay, so let's say the first signal I want to generate is a square wave, okay? And actually, let's do triangle wave, okay? And let's say I want a 50 kilohertz signal, so I'll just type in 50 here, kilohertz, okay? And your period is adjusted accordingly by the software. I want an amplitude of, say, 2 volts and an offset of 1 volt. So it's easy as just typing in the numbers. Okay, and let's say my second channel, I want it to be a sine wave of frequency 25 kilohertz. Okay, and amplitude of half and an offset of 2 volts. Okay, it's just a random signal that I'm generating here. But that's it. That's all you need to do to set up the Wavegen to generate the signals that you want. Okay, and so right now it's only set up to generate, but until you hit run, it's not actually outputting anything. Okay, so that's when you're actually doing the labs, that you want to actually hit the run so that it's active, right? And it says running over here. That means that the device is actually outputting these signals. And in demo mode, it's also the same thing. It's just that you don't have anything coming out of the device because you don't have a device. Okay, but either way, unless these channels are actually active and running, you won't measure anything on the oscilloscopes, even in the demo mode. Okay, so now that you're able to generate signals and run them, let's go to the oscilloscope and how you can measure it. Okay, so again, to get to this point, I just clicked on this welcome, and it'll bring you back to the list of instruments that's available, and you just click on scope. Okay, so when you're actually working with the analog discovery device and building circuits, you can connect any signal that you desire to channel 1 and channel 2 of the oscilloscope inputs. But when you're running in the demo mode, the software automatically assumes that waveforms 1, channel 1 of the waveforms is connected to channel 1 of the oscilloscope, and channel 2 of the Wavegen is connected to channel 2 of the oscilloscope. Okay, so in Wavegen here, I generated a triangle wave in channel 1 and sine wave in channel 2. So when I run the oscilloscope, I should see a triangle wave on channel 1, the yellow curve, and a sine wave in channel 2, the blue curve. Okay, so let's hit run. And so there's signal here, but the scales are not adjusted correctly, right? So I had a signal, a triangle wave, which is 50 kilohertz, and it had a period of 20 microseconds, right? So let's say if I wanted to visualize let's say I wanted to visualize 2 periods of the triangle wave, then I need to adjust my time base here. So there's a total of 10 divisions here. And if I want 400 microseconds or 200 microseconds, I need this to be 20 microseconds per division, right? Okay, great. Yeah, so that's going to give me 10 different periods, 10 periods of the triangle wave, okay, and 5 periods of the square sine wave. Okay, now I also want to change the offsets in channel 1 and channel 2 so that the signals are completely on the display. So let's say channel 1, I want the offset to go down, so I'll pull this offset down here. Okay, now there's many different ways of changing the offset. You can drag this yellow triangle on the left here to change the offset, or you can directly type in the offset here on the right to say -1. Okay, and then here this controls the vertical scaling. Okay, so you can change this also to say maybe 1 volt per division. Okay, so now each division is worth 1 volts, and you can do the same thing with the second channel. For the second channel, let me just drag this down here, and then I can change this again to, I don't know, let's say 250 millivolts per division. Okay, so now right now it looks like the sine wave and the triangle wave have the same amplitude, but actually these are on different vertical scalings. So you have to be careful there when just viewing the signals that way, right? So scales do matter, and also the offsets matter. Okay, so now you're able to control the vertical and horizontal scales, and also the offsets, so that you can visualize the signal the best way the way you want to. Okay, so so that's that. The next part is making measurements on this signal. Okay, so in order to make measurements on the signals, what you will do is click on measurements over here. Don't click on the measurements on the right. These are for digital measurements. You want to click on the measurements over here. Okay, and then you can add different measurements. So on channel 1, let's say I want to measure the amplitude of the signal on channel 1. So I'll click on vertical because it's a vertical measurement. Now I'll click amplitude. Let me actually measure the peak-to-peak voltage. Okay, and click on add, and your peak-to-peak is being measured at 4 volts. Now, is that correct? On channel 1, I created a 2 volt amplitude, so the peak-to-peak is 4 volts, and that's correct. Okay, let's say on channel 2, I want to add an average measurement. So that's measuring the offset of channel 2, and that says, and the measurement says it's 2 volts. I generated a sine wave with an offset of 2 volts, and I measure an offset of 2 volts. So that's correct. Okay. So similarly, you can also add time domain measurements like frequency. Okay. And or if you're more inclined, you can also add, say, the period, okay, of channel 2. Okay, so channel 1, the frequency is 50 kilohertz, just like the way we set it up, and channel 1, the period is 20 microseconds, just like the way we set it up. Okay, so that's the way you use the waveforms application in demo mode, there's not much you need to do to get to the demo mode. The only thing you need to keep in mind is that in the demo mode, Wavegen 1 is connected to scope channel 1, and Wavegen channel 2 is connected to scope channel 2. And the things you do to adjust the scalings and the offsets are kind of the same as you would do on LT-Spice or any other oscilloscope or any other graphing tools, right? So you have a scale, vertical and horizontal scale, and vertical and horizontal offsets, and that you can change. In order to make the measurements, there are pre-built functions there to make measurements. And on Wavegen 1, on the Wavegen, you can just give it the different signal parameters to generate the signal of your desire. Okay, so that is all that there is. And with that, I think it should give you enough to work on and practice for the LT-Spice version of the lab practical as well. Okay, and let me know if you have any other questions or confusions about this whole process. All right, good luck.